Alrighty. Welcome to our final sustainability lunch and learn of 2020. I'm really sad that this is our last week. I was just telling Paige, I don't know what I'm going to do next Wednesday when I don't have one of these at noon. So we've been really enjoying them. I think the sustainability ones have been really great and really informative. So I'm looking forward to our last one. I was also hoping to be able to tell all of you about our next Lunch and Learn series starting in January, but it's not quite far enough ahead. It's going to be on birds and different birding issues, but I don't have dates or anything for that yet. So definitely keep an eye out in early January for your emails, and we'll make sure that that everyone finds out about those programs. They should be a great deal of fun as well. We're really enjoying this format. And don't forget that if there's any that you've missed, you can go to our YouTube page, and all of the recordings are saved there, as well as on our Facebook page. So if you missed anything or want to rewatch one, definitely you definitely go there. And finally, just a thank you to Visit Bucks County. These programs are made possible through a grant, a tourism grant from Visit Bucks, and we are really appreciative of their support. Alrighty, so those are the things that I needed to mention. I'm going to turn it over to Paige. Paige is a recent grad and has done some really cool work with rooftop gardens for birds. So I'm going to let her take it away.
Thank you. I will share my screen. So, hello. Like Stacy said, my name is Paige, and I am a recent graduate of Parsons School of Design up in New York City with a major in product design. Product design kind of encompasses a wide array of design. You can design anything from your consumer goods, your tables, your plates, your tech gadgets, your cars, to things like your green roofs. And today I'm here to talk to you about sustainable rooftops for birds, which, to be honest, isn't really a thing yet. At least I can't provide you with photos and details of what this is and how this works. We have green roofs and we have bird habitats, but we don't currently have a good example of a green roof dedicated to birds, as well as something that's helping to renature the city. And I definitely don't have any concrete answers on how to make rooftops more bird friendly, but I can provide you with a better understanding of what green infrastructure is, what it looks like to be a bird in the city, and what's being done to make our cities more green and wildlife friendly. And like I said, I'm not an expert, so if you guys have anything to add in, that's more than welcome, because I'm also still learning. To start off, I just wanted to give you a bit of background on myself. As I said, my name is Paige, and I grew up here in Bucks County. I spent most of my childhood, helping out in the garden, playing outside, and my family is, obsessed with birds and bird houses and bird feeders. So you can imagine when I, moved into the city, the shock of no longer being surrounded by nature. The trees are replaced by tall buildings, and the animals and the birds are replaced by, a few pigeons and squirrels that you really just try to avoid when you're walking through the streets. And you can't just actively go and be outside and be in nature. You really have to seek it out. And being a full-time student, it was really difficult. And I struggled with that lack of green space. So I began focusing my design work on how to incorporate green spaces and green elements into our urban environments. And questions of how do you reconnect urban dwellers with nature? How do you make spaces more green and sustainable, and make them more accessible? And what does that even look like? Most of our cities are designed for humans. You theoretically have everything that you need. There were times that I didn't have to leave my 5-block radius because I had my gym, my grocery store, my school, all within walking distance. But a lot of cities are not designed for our animals and for our wildlife. Cities and their residents oftentimes forget that the land that they were once on had its own thriving ecosystem and was green and lush. And with urbanization, we've really taken over all of this land and pushed out, most signs of plants and our animal life. And then on this slide, I have side-by-side images of 2 different versions of what the island of Manhattan looked like 400 years apart. The one on the left is a rendering of what Manhattan used to be, European settlers around the year 1609. This island was known as Mannahatta, and it shows, how green the island once was. It had over 1,000 species of plants and animals, which included over 233 types of birds. And this was a landscape that, rivaled parks today, such as Yellowstone and Yosemite, due to its biodiversity. And if you fast forward, 400 years to the image on the right, which is the Manhattan that we know today, which is this really dense gridded metropolis, which is home to over 1 million buildings. And that's 1 million rooftops, which accounts for over 40,000 acres of underutilized space. And only 730 of these rooftops are used for green spaces, which is the equivalent of 60 acres when we have 44,000 acres of space, which leaves over 999,000 roofs that look something like this, and like this, and this. And if you think about these 999,000 gray bare roofs in the city, not only are they not being used to their full potential, but they are adding to what's known as the urban heat island effect, which is where the city becomes this, pocket of heat, this pocket of higher temperatures, because it lacks in the vegetation that naturally regulates our climate. These dark roofs aren't able to reflect the solar waves back up into the atmosphere. So instead, they absorb the sun and they turn it into heat. Because of this, on a hot day in the summer, the temperature can feel up to 5 degrees hotter than what it actually is. You can see the graphic on the right, where there is less vegetation in pockets of the city, the hotter the temperature is. And then I just included some photos of people kind of utilizing their, bare roofs during this pandemic, or at least doing the best that they can to make use of this empty space to enjoy some fresh air. Because again, you can't just walk outside and be in nature, and not have to see anyone. So roofs are kind of the city equivalent to that. However, green roofs have been proven to reduce the urban heat island effect. And to give you a quick overview of green roofs, I just kind of included a basic layering system for all parts of a green roof, which is pretty straightforward. You have at the bottom your waterproof membrane, which serves as a water and nutrient reservoir and protects, the roofs from leaks. Then you have the root barrier that just keeps roots from, tearing through and causing more leaks. And then the drainage layer, which is kind of this egg carton shaped layer that manages the water by retaining only, what's needed for the plant growth. And then you have the filter cloth, which keeps any of your soil from being washed away by that drainage layer. And then you have your soil, and on top of that, you have your plants, which is usually a mix of native soil and some mineral additives. The benefits of green roofs are, of course, that they, again, increase the amount of available green space in the city. For New York City, again, it would provide over 44,000 acres of green space. And, and in cities, we build upwards, so we don't really have any more, ground space to add in parks. So green roofs are a great way to add in that space without taking up that prime real estate. They also lower the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. 1 square acre can sequester 1.52 metric tons of carbon over a 2-year span. And then in reference to the last slide, they can help reduce the urban heat island effect by 5 degrees, which offsets that 5 degrees that the current gray roofs are adding into the city. And they also can reduce stormwater runoff by capturing up to 60% of rainfall, depending on, the storm and the season and all of that. However, as you can imagine, they do have a high upfront cost to install, which is why there aren't very many of them in our cities. Depending on the type of green roof installed, it can cost anywhere from $10 to $20 per square foot. And in New York City, as of November 15th of last year, they are requiring all new buildings or buildings that are undergoing major roof renovations to install a green roof or solar panels or some sort of mix of the two. And they're providing a tax abatement equal to $450 per square foot, which in some cases is about half the cost of installing it, which is a really good incentive for people who are looking to begin installing them. And I know that in Philadelphia, they provide a rebate of up to 50% as well. So it really helps offset that initial cost. But most of the time, our green roofs tend to fall flat. I mean, quite literally, it's by design. They're meant to be part of the city's green infrastructure to help make our cities more livable for the humans that are there. But most of the time, we forget about our wildlife. Or if we end up making our spaces more habitable for them, it's an added benefit and not so much planned into our design. And that's because unfortunately our birds and our wildlife aren't profitable yet. Um, and that's what I heard, from a variety of green roofing companies that I spoke to last semester when I was working on a project. Is that people, are willing to pay the price to install a green roof if it's for them and it works for them, but not so much if it's going to be more beneficial for our birds and for our wildlife, because it doesn't make them money. This picture that I included here is the Dearborn truck plant, which is in Michigan. This is one of the largest green roofs in the world. It's over 10 acres big. And Ford is hopeful that this green roof will extend the life of their roof to about twice that of a conventional roof. And the whole roof is entirely sedum, which is a pretty typical plant choice of green roofs because of the little maintenance that they require. Other green roofs, such as Brooklyn Grange, take green roofs a step further. They utilize their green roof space to grow crops as well as to host events for their local communities or even to host weddings. Their roof in particular grows a wide variety of plants and crops that they sell at the local farmers markets, as well as growing things like wildflowers, specifically, for our pollinators. But in general, our green roofs tend to be very human-centered, designing for, what we may want or what we may need and what's going to benefit us in the future. However, developers and designers tend to forget, again, about how important animals and wildlife are to our ecosystem and us. Therefore, they're rarely included in the equation. But we do have to start somewhere. And just putting more green space into the city, it's already a big step forward in the right direction. But as we continue to develop, we need to continue to innovate because these green roofs are great, but they don't provide the adequate habitat for birds with the breeding and the shelter and all the food that they require to thrive and not just survive. Even New York City's biggest green roof, which is the Javits Center, it's almost 7 acres big. It's relatively flat. However, it does do some really incredible things for the city. It absorbs almost 7 million gallons of storm water runoff annually. It's home to 3 honeybee hives, and it's a habitat for 27 different species of birds and 5 different bat species. And this is one of the best examples of a green roof in the world that is beneficial to our birds. Some key species that surveyors have noted using the space have been herring gulls, European starlings, and barn swallows. And they have noted at least 524 different birds using the space, again, including the European starling, barn swallows, American kestrels, and the northern mockingbird, as well as a dozen type of nests that have been found on the roof and a few eggs even being hatched. And that's all without designing for them. There's no trees, there's no diverse native plants, no shelter or designated food and water stations, but it's a green space and it's more than they had before. As some of you may know, we have lost over 2.9 billion birds since 1970, and that's 1 in 4 birds. If you look at the chart to the right, it includes, every type of bird in every ecosystem, with grassland birds being hit the hardest. And habitat loss is a main cause of this massive loss. That's from, expanding our cities and our suburbs and taking away their forests and their grasslands and all of these spaces that birds need to thrive, which puts most, if not all, birds at threat for being endangered and possibly extinct if we don't change the way that we're operating. When I was doing research for my capstone project, I was talking to a man who works at the New York City Audubon, and I was like, I really want to design for endangered birds. That's what I really want to go for. If you could give me a list, and then I can, make a habitat design specifically for them. And he's like, all birds are endangered. We have lost, 1 in 4 of our birds. So and even if you create a green space, that's specifically dedicated to these few species of birds, it's not, a for sure fact that those birds are going to use it. So just kind of thinking of designing these spaces that a wide variety of birds can use. New York City sits in the middle of the Atlantic Flyway, which is a major migratory path for birds. It's estimated that over 500 different species of birds use this flyway every single year. However, this flyway is also home to 1/3 of the US population. And birds started using this because there was, little interferences with mountains, and they're close to the coast, and it was a really good route for them to take. However, I can't imagine that they were expecting to also have to fly through, 1/3 of the US population, all of the interferences that come with that. And our cities capture up to 20% of our world's avian biodiversity, yet they're a massive obstacle for birds that are flying through. The skyscrapers and the lights and the reflections all make it incredibly hazardous for birds to fly through because it's not part of their natural environment. New York City alone kills somewhere between 90 and 230,000 birds a year just from the glass skyscrapers, which birds oftentimes mistake for, more foliage or a clear, unobstructed flying space. However, last December, the city did pass a law that does require all new buildings to install bird-friendly glass, which has to be applied to the, first 75 feet of buildings, as well as any balconies, hand railings, all sorts of things. And bird-friendly glass is just glass that includes visible obstacles, whether that's a pattern in the glass or an ultraviolet coating, just to make it less reflective. So we are moving in the right direction. It's a small step, but it's definitely a step. And when birds are able to survive within the city, their spaces are very makeshift. A lot of the times you see them using air conditioning units or, ledges of buildings to make their nests, and eating, scraps of food that are left on the street, and they're surviving. Again, they're just not thriving, and they need better spaces in our cities. So with all of this in mind, I thought I would just show you examples of how some cities are helping to aid not only in bird migration, but helping, other animals with other migratory paths and all sorts of things. This first one being the Bee Highway in Norway. It was created by Bye Bye, which is an environmental group, which they created in 2015. And it's the first of its kind. They have created this route for these honeybees filled with, green roofs and flowers that supports bees living in urban environments. And their whole goal is to connect green spaces throughout cities to help bees navigate. And they have a website where all of the information can be found for people that want to get involved on how they can, contribute, and also mapping where these contributions are and kind of seeing this path throughout the city that is helping these honeybees survive. And I do think it's a really well-designed system. It's something that really inspires me, and I think it's something that can absolutely be applied to other cities and other birds or other animals. And then the next project is a New York City-based project called BirdLink, which is by Anina Gerchik. It's this scalable, replicable network of living habitats and sculptures. It supports migratory birds that disperse seeds that help, maintain our wildlife corridors. And it also helps to alert people to the challenges that are facing the bird population as well as plant biodiversity, because these sculptures are in our major parks, and they provide people with information on, again, what challenges birds are facing, and it shows you what are native plants in the area and makes it more visible, because I think a lot of the times we're living in these cities and we forget, about nature. We're so used to just walking, through the streets and not really having to interact with nature. And you forget how important these things are. So these sculptures are really helping to show people like all of these issues that birds are facing, because a lot of people, don't tend to think about them. And then looking towards the future, we have all of these positive steps, but we need to figure out a way to link them all, to connect the benefits of green roofs with the benefits of birds, and even with the benefits of, ourselves and our cities. What I worked on last semester for my capstone project was utilizing walls or building structures on green roofs to create nesting and resting sites for resident birds and birds that are traveling and migrating through. It's a super kind of bare bones sketch, but it emphasizes the importance of adequate habitats for birds. And this is a project that, I spent 4 months researching and starting to design, but it's something that you could spend a lifetime on, again, because there's no current, good examples of these bird habitats on green roofs. And again, it's not enough to plant sedum on a roof and have birds utilize it because it's the only space that they can. We need to start making sure we have green roofs and green spaces that are dedicated specifically for birds. So there's no human interferences, and making sure we're all, planting native bird-friendly plants to attract these birds. And we need to be including birds in the equation as reasons to build our green roofs. And then just to end this, I'm just gonna leave you off with some cute photos of birds on our green roofs. And again, this was a short presentation, but I hope that I could provide you with all of the ways these green roofs are assisting our bird populations, and at least, provide you with information on what green roofs are currently doing for our birds and what is still possible and what's to come in the future. And then, maybe in the future, I will be able to show you how, beautiful, incredible these bird habitats are on roofs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paige. Really, really interesting stuff. We did have a few questions. So Jim wanted to know, in the city, can most roofs in the city actually support the weight of the soil in the plants, or is there a lot of infrastructure that needs to be updated in order for that to happen?
There's absolutely a lot of infrastructure that needs to be updated. Some roofs are able to do that right now, but I know in the apartment building that I was living in for a few years, we weren't even allowed on top of the roofs because they weren't safe to bear weight. But, once these roofs eventually do undergo these roof renovations, which is desperately needed for lots of roofs to make them safer and to even just let people on them, it would just be a great step forward. And even for roofs that are currently able to, bear weight and are safe for, humans and all sorts of things, it's the next good step.
Excellent. And along the similar route, and actually another question I was going to ask as well. What about types of plants? I know sedum is something that's used a lot. I know people tend to use a lot of succulents because it gets very dry up on the roof. Have you found that a lot of our native plants could be used? And obviously, can we get that full ecosystem of habitats with trees and shrubs and all of that, on a roof as well? Or would we have to stick more things like grassland meadow type things, do you think?
Absolutely. So there are two main different types of green roofs. You have your intensive green roofs and you have your extensive green roofs. And a lot of the green roofs are currently these extensive green roofs because they require, I think, less than 4 inches of soil. So a lot of the times with 4 inches or less of soil, you are planting things like sedum and things that don't need a ton of maintenance, a ton of soil and those things. But for the more extensive green roofs, you can get, I think, up to like 10 inches. I might be wrong on that, but a lot more soil. So you are able to plant, more native plants. Places like Brooklyn Grange do have these intensive roofs and they are able to plant all sorts of vegetables, all sorts of shrubs and plants and things like that. Maybe not trees because they do require a lot more soil, but some larger plants that would be more or more native. Absolutely.
Excellent. Now, do you see what you're doing and the thoughts and how it grows? Do you think it's going to be more sort of that sort of, uniform all the way across, or do you think it's going to ultimately be more of a mix? Because to me, in order to plant some of those bigger things, you would probably need like raised beds and things like that. Is that sort of an idea that you think would catch on and maybe as a mix? Just curious.
In terms of like raised beds and things just planted on the green roof?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a lot heavier, so it would need that infrastructure, but
Yeah,
but as an alternative to just like a flat, everything sort of the same.
No, that's absolutely possible. And again, Brooklyn Grange, they have created green roofs for different spaces, and some of them do include like larger raised plant beds just to give the green roof like more of a a texture, a more yeah, it's for sure possible. And that's something I think would be super important to allow birds different heights and not just kind of all this one flat surface.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Did anyone have other questions? You're welcome. We're not a big group. If you would want to unmute yourself and ask Paige any questions that you have, you're welcome to, or you can put them in the chat and we can grab them from there. I think this is a really great presentation to sort of go out on, because we've been talking about a lot of, sort of physical things. And last week we talked about habitats and planting, but I think this is, a great sort of innovative way to take, the structures that we already have and sort of rework them so that they, not only work for people, but also work for the wildlife. I love that. So any other questions? All righty. Well, Paige, hard question for you. Where are you hoping to take this next?
Anywhere, really. I would love to continue to keep working on these designs and keep connecting with people. Again, I've only spent, my 4 months left in school and then up until now doing research. And I think there's years of research and work to be done because I don't know everything about birds, about green roofs, about plants, about any of that. So I would love to be able to keep innovating and keep designing. And even if it's not these green roof spaces, I think anything that can help to make our cities and our suburbs more bird friendly, more animal friendly, and just connecting with people in the community and emphasizing the importance of our wildlife and nature and our ecosystems on ourselves, I think is super important. So anything that I can do to help that out would be incredible.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much again for today. And thank you all so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed this this Sustainable Lunch and Learn series, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. And again, this video will be available on Facebook as well as on our YouTube page within the next couple of days, so that you can rewatch it. And definitely keep a lookout and start joining us again for these probably sometime in like late January. So thank you all very much. Have a really happy holidays, and we hope to see everybody out soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Paige.